The coffee cup exploded against the marble floor at exactly 6:59 in the morning. Not cracked, not slipped, exploded. The sharp sound ricocheted across the 72nd floor of Kwon Tower, and every member of the household staff froze where they stood. One assistant nearly dropped a tray. Another stopped halfway through a sentence. Even the automated espresso machine seemed to fall silent, because everyone knew what that sound meant. Something had gone wrong. And when something went wrong around Kwon Jae-won, people lost jobs. The billionaire stood motionless beside the kitchen island, staring at the dark coffee stain spreading across the polished white floor. The cook, Mr. Shin, looked as though his soul had already left his body. "I can explain, sir." Jae-won's eyes never left the stain. "You used different beans." The room became painfully quiet. Mr. Shin swallowed. "The supplier substituted the order this morning. There was a shipping delay. I thought." "You thought?" The words landed like a hammer. "I didn't want to interrupt your schedule." Jae-won finally looked at him. The expression on his face wasn't anger. That would have been easier. It was disappointment. Cold, clinical, final. "You interrupted my schedule the moment you assumed I wouldn't notice." "Sir." "Mrs. Park." The household manager appeared almost instantly. "Prepare Mr. Shin's severance package." The cook's face went white. "Mr. Kwon, please." 7 months. "I've worked here 7 months. And in 7 months." Jae-won replied calmly. "You never learned that details matter." He picked up his tablet. "Enjoy your severance." Then he walked away. The private elevator doors closed behind him. Only then did anyone breathe again. Mr. Shin left before noon. He became employee number 11. 11 cooks, 3 years, gone. By evening, Mrs. Park was sitting alone in her office, staring at another resignation file. Her eyes drifted toward the city lights outside the window. Seoul glittered beneath the tower like scattered diamonds. The city looked alive. The 72nd floor felt dead. It wasn't just the cooks. The atmosphere itself had become unbearable. Everything functioned perfectly. Nothing felt human. Jae-won's penthouse operated like a machine. Meals appeared. Schedules were maintained, meetings happened, employees rotated in and out, yet somehow nobody laughed, nobody lingered, nobody felt at home. Mrs. Park sighed and opened a new employment listing. This time she wrote it differently. Not because the requirements had changed, but because she was desperate, seeking personal chef, exceptional culinary training required, experience under pressure, knowledge of international cuisine and Korean culinary traditions, ability to adapt, ability to lead, ability to maintain professionalism in demanding environments. She paused. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. What she really wanted to write was, "Must somehow teach a billionaire how to be a person again." Instead, she deleted the thought and posted the advertisement. 2 weeks later, she was reviewing applications. Most were impressive. Some were extraordinary. None felt right. Then she opened one from Atlanta, Georgia. Zara Mitchell, 29 years old. Advanced culinary training in France. Private dining experience. Diplomatic events. High-profile clientele. Excellent references. One sentence appeared repeatedly across the recommendation letters. "She makes people feel cared for." Mrs. Park sat back. Interesting. Then she opened Zara's personal statement. Most applicants spent entire pages discussing achievements. Zara's was barely 2 paragraphs, direct, honest, warm. At the very bottom was a single line. "I grew up cooking Sunday dinner for 11 people in a 3-bedroom house with 1 oven. Pressure doesn't scare me." Mrs. Park read the sentence twice, then 3 times, and for the first time since posting the advertisement, she smiled. 43 minutes into the interview call, Mrs. Park made her decision. 3 weeks later, Zara Mitchell stepped out of a taxi in front of Kwon Tower. The sky was gray. Rain drizzled lightly across Seoul. Most newcomers stared at the 72-story skyscraper with intimidation. Zara looked up and grinned. "Well," she said to herself, "that's ridiculous." She wore a bright yellow jacket, carried 2 suitcases, and had a spice case tucked under one arm. Nothing about her appearance matched the polished corporate energy of the building. which was exactly why she stood out. Inside the lobby, the receptionist checked her identification. "Service entrance is on the 5th floor." Zara smiled. "I'm good." She stepped into the main elevator. The receptionist watched her leave. Poor girl. He'd seen this before. The confidence, the optimism, the belief they would be different. Most lasted 3 months. When the doors opened on the 72nd floor, Mrs. Park was waiting. Their handshake lasted less than 2 seconds, yet both women instantly recognized something in the other. Competence. The kitchen tour began immediately. Zara stepped inside and stopped. The room was breathtaking. Professional-grade equipment, custom refrigeration, imported surfaces, enough technology to support a Michelin-starred restaurant. Yet something felt wrong. The kitchen wasn't alive. It felt like a showroom, like nobody had ever laughed there, like nobody had ever cooked for someone they loved. Mrs. Park studied her expression. "What do you think?" Zara slowly turned in a circle. "It's beautiful." Then she smiled. "We'll fix it." Mrs. Park blinked. "Fix it?" "Yeah." Zara set her spice case on the counter and opened a cabinet. Then another. Then another. "This kitchen doesn't feel like food lives here. It looks expensive." She paused. "It doesn't look loved." For a brief moment, something flickered across Mrs. Park's face. Hope. The feeling disappeared almost immediately, but Zara saw it. "Interesting. Very interesting." Mrs. Park handed over a tablet. "Mr. Kwon's dietary profile. I'd also like his medical records," Zara said. Mrs. Park froze. "Excuse me? Medical history? Because food affects everything. If his iron levels are low, I cook differently. If he has inflammation, I cook differently. If he sleeps poorly, I cook differently." Nobody had ever asked. Not once. After a long moment, Mrs. Park nodded. "I'll have them sent over." Then she left. Halfway down the corridor, she stopped walking and looked back. Zara was already reorganizing ingredients, already humming, already making the enormous kitchen feel slightly warmer. Mrs. Park found herself smiling. Maybe, just maybe, this one would survive. The next morning, Kwon Jae-won arrived at the kitchen doorway at exactly 7 o'clock. He always did this. Every new employee received the same evaluation. People revealed themselves under pressure, especially when they didn't expect it. He stepped silently into the doorway and waited. Normally, new cooks sensed him immediately. They jumped, apologized, over-explained, performed. This one didn't. Zara stood at the stove, humming softly, stirring a pot, adjusting heat, completely unaware that one of the most powerful men in Asia was standing behind her. 10 seconds passed. Then 20. Jae-won frowned. 30 seconds. Nothing. For reasons he couldn't explain, he felt strangely irritated and strangely curious. "What are you making?" he finally said. Zara turned, and for the first time their eyes met. Neither of them knew it yet, but the entire course of both their lives had just changed. "Oh," she said casually. "You must be Mr. Kwon." Must be, not definitely, not obviously, must be. As though he might have been a delivery driver. Something about that irritated him immediately and interested him even more. "What are you making?" he repeated. Zara returned her attention to the stove. Doenjang jjigae. The aroma filled the room. Warm, rich, comforting. She stirred the soup once. With black garlic, Jae-won's eyebrow lifted. "That's not traditional." "No." She tasted from a spoon. "Neither am I." The answer caught him off guard. He didn't know what response he expected. It wasn't that. Then she added, "I also adjusted the iron content." His expression hardened slightly. "What? Your medical records? Your iron levels have been trending down for 6 months. Jae-won froze. Most people never notice details like that. Most people never looked. Yet this woman had arrived less than 24 hours ago and was already discussing his blood work. "You weren't instructed to do that." "No." "Then why did you?" The answer came instantly. "Because I care whether the people I cook for stay healthy." The words hit harder than they should have. Nobody spoke to him like that. Employees followed instructions, partners negotiated, investors demanded performance. Nobody simply cared. He adjusted his cuffs. "If I require dietary modifications in the future, I'll communicate them. Sounds good. Then she turned back to cooking. No apology, no explanation, no attempt to impress him. Just confidence, the kind that didn't need validation. For the first time in years, Jae-won found himself standing in his own kitchen with absolutely nothing useful to say. 3 seconds later, he left. Mrs. Park watched him walk down the corridor. She knew that walk. She'd watched him after acquisitions, after negotiations, after major decisions. This was different. He looked unsettled. Good. Very good. That evening she wrote a note. Day 1. Interesting. The first week passed quietly, at least on the surface. Jae-won maintained his routine. 6:30 wake up, 7 o'clock breakfast, meetings, conference calls, investor briefings. Yet something unusual started happening. Every morning he arrived at the kitchen doorway slightly earlier. The first day, 7 sharp. The second, 6:58. By Friday, 6:53. Nobody mentioned it, especially not Zara. She simply continued cooking, humming softly, moving through the kitchen like she belonged there. And every morning he stood in the doorway watching. The strangest part wasn't the food, though the food was exceptional. It was the atmosphere. The kitchen felt different, warmer. The staff felt lighter. One afternoon, Jae-won walked past and saw Sun Young, the young kitchen assistant, actually laughing. She nearly dropped a tray when she noticed him, and the smile vanished immediately. But he had seen it. Later that day, he asked Mrs. Park, "When did Sun Young become so talkative, Mrs.?" Park hid her amusement. "Since Miss Mitchell arrived." "Why?" "People tend to relax around her." That answer bothered him, because it was true. Everywhere Zara went, people relaxed. Security guards, assistants, drivers, cleaning staff. Within days, she knew everyone's name, their birthdays, their favorite meals, their children's names. It made no sense. She had known these people less than 2 weeks, yet somehow they treated her like family. One evening, Jae-won walked into the kitchen unexpectedly and stopped. Mrs. Park was eating. Sun Young was eating. 2 assistants were eating, and Zara sat among them sharing short stories, everyone laughing. For a moment, nobody noticed him. Then silence crashed across the room. The assistants immediately stood. Sun Young nearly choked. Mrs. Park maintained her composure. Only Zara remained seated. "Evening," she said. Jae-won looked around. "What is this? Dinner? I can see that." She smiled. "Then we're off to a great start." Mrs. Park lowered her eyes. Sun Young looked terrified. Meanwhile, Zara continued eating. Jae-won stared for several seconds, then left. Nobody moved. A full minute passed. Finally, Sun Young whispered, "How are you still employed?" Zara laughed. "I honestly don't know." By week 3, the entire floor felt transformed. Fresh herbs appeared on the windowsill. Music played quietly during prep. Staff actually lingered in the kitchen. The place felt alive, which was precisely why the coffee incident happened. Thursday, 7 o'clock. Jae-won picked up his coffee, took one sip, and paused. The room became silent. Zara noticed immediately. "So?" He set down the cup. "The temperature is wrong." Every assistant within hearing distance stopped breathing. "Here we go." Another firing. Another disaster. Another employee about to become number 12. Zara looked at the cup, then looked at him. "No." The room froze. Jae-won's eyes narrowed. "No, no." She wiped her hands on a towel. "The temperature is identical to yesterday." "It isn't, it is." The silence became painful. Sun Young quietly moved toward the pantry. Jae-won crossed his arms. "You're disagreeing with me." "I'm disagreeing with physics." "What?" "You let it sit." She pointed at the cup. "You stood there reading emails. If coffee sits for 3 minutes, it cools." The billionaire stared. The staff stared. Nobody in human history had ever spoken to Kwon Jae-won this way and survived. Then Zara smiled. "If you'd like hotter coffee, drink it sooner." The kitchen entered a state of collective spiritual crisis. Mrs. Park nearly walked into a wall. Jae-won stared at Zara, waiting. Surely she'd realize what she'd said. Surely she'd apologize. Surely she'd panic. She didn't. She simply returned to plating breakfast. Eventually, he picked up the coffee and left. The moment he disappeared around the corner, the kitchen exploded. "Are you insane?" Sun Young practically shouted. Zara blinked. "What? You told him to drink faster." "I did. You told him he was wrong." "He was." Sun Young looked like she might faint. Mrs. Park quietly turned away, because if she looked at Zara any longer, she was going to start laughing. The next morning, the coffee appeared 4 minutes later. Exactly 4. Perfect timing, perfect temperature, perfect solution. Neither mentioned it, but the cup came back empty, and for some reason that felt important. The real problem began on a Wednesday evening, a completely ordinary Wednesday, the kind that changes everything. Zara was finishing cleanup. Mrs. Park was reviewing schedules, nothing unusual, until Zara casually said, "I probably won't be in until 9 tomorrow." Mrs. Park looked up. "Oh, I have a date tonight." The knife in Sun Young's hand slipped. Clang. Nobody noticed, because at that exact moment, 2 steps outside the kitchen doorway, Kwon Jae-won stopped walking. He couldn't explain why. He couldn't explain why his chest suddenly tightened, or why he remained standing there, motionless, like a man hearing terrible news. Inside the kitchen, Zara continued talking, completely unaware. "He's taking me to a jazz club." Mrs. Park blinked. "A date?" "Second one, actually." A strange feeling moved through Jae-won. Unfamiliar, sharp, uncomfortable, possessive, and for the first time in years, Kwon Jae-won realized he was jealous. Not annoyed, not curious, jealous. The realization hit him like a truck, because jealous people wanted things. And Kwon Jae-won had spent 20 years convincing himself he didn't need anyone. Yet somehow the thought of Zara spending an evening with another man felt unbearable, and he had absolutely no idea what to do about it. The date was at 7. By 6:30, Zara was standing in front of her apartment mirror, trying very hard not to overthink it, which was difficult, because Daniel was easy to like. There was nothing complicated about him. No emotional puzzles, no hidden walls, no exhausting games. Just a genuinely kind man who listened when she spoke and remembered things she told him. The green dress won the battle against 3 other outfits. Her natural curls framed her face. The earrings her best friend had mailed from Atlanta caught the light. When she finally looked in the mirror, she smiled. Not because she looked beautiful, though she did, but because she looked happy. And happiness had been harder to find than beauty. 3 blocks away, 72 floors above Seoul, Kwon Jae-won sat alone in his office, pretending to review a merger proposal. Pretending, because he had read the same paragraph 6 times and still couldn't remember what it said. His eyes drifted toward the clock. 6:32, then 6:33, then 6:34. This is ridiculous. He pushed the file away. A grown man, a billionaire, the CEO of a multinational technology empire, distracted because his chef had a date. The thought should have embarrassed him. Instead, it irritated him, which somehow made it worse. His phone buzzed. A message from Mrs. Park. Everything prepared for tomorrow morning. Miss Mitchell has completed all prep work. He stared at the message, then at the empty kitchen visible through the office doorway, then at the herbs on the windowsill. His chest tightened unexpectedly. The kitchen felt empty. He stood up immediately. Work. He needed work. Work always fixed things. Unfortunately, tonight it didn't. At 7:45, he found himself standing in the kitchen again. At 8:30, he was still there. At 9:15, he made tea, badly. At 9:30, he poured it away. At 10, he made another cup, even worse. At 10:30, he was sitting at the island, staring at a container label written in Zara's handwriting. Heat 3 minutes. Don't rush it. He stared at those words for nearly a minute, then suddenly laughed. Once, short, disbelieving, because somewhere between the doorway conversations and the morning soups and the herbs on the windowsill, he had developed feelings. Actual feelings. For his cook. Oh, that was all he managed. Just, oh. The entire situation was catastrophic, and it was only getting worse. Meanwhile, across the city, Zara was laughing. Daniel had just finished telling a story about accidentally attending the wrong wedding reception. Twice, in different years. She nearly spilled her drink. The jazz club glowed with warm amber light. Music drifted through the room. Conversation flowed effortlessly. After a comfortable silence, Daniel studied her for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" "Depends." He laughed. "That's not encouraging." "Ask." His expression softened. "Are you happy in Seoul?" The question surprised her. She thought about it carefully, then looked toward the musicians. 3 months ago, she would have said no. 3 weeks ago, she might have said maybe. Now things were different, and she wasn't entirely sure why. "I think," she said slowly, "I'm becoming happy." Something flickered across his face. A gentle, understanding smile. "That's a good answer." She smiled back. Yet for reasons she couldn't explain, another face briefly appeared in her mind. Sharp eyes, tailored suits, a man standing silently in kitchen doorways, a man who rarely smiled, a man who somehow looked lonelier than anyone she'd ever met. She pushed the thought away immediately. Back at Kwon Tower, sleep never came. 2 a.m., still awake. 3, still awake. 4, still awake. At 4:30, he finally gave up, dressed, walked through the silent penthouse, and found himself standing in the kitchen. Again, he opened the refrigerator and read her notes. Closed it, opened it again. Kanji base, stir twice, don't rush it. Fruit already cut, you're welcome. A strange smile appeared despite himself, then disappeared immediately. This is insanity. Yet he remained there, standing alone in a kitchen at 4:30 in the morning because he missed someone who wasn't even gone. That realization hurt his pride a lot. The next day, Zara arrived at 9 exactly. Jae-won lasted 23 minutes before finding an excuse to enter the kitchen. The excuse itself was pathetic. Household inventory, a subject he had never cared about once in 3 years. Yet here he was, holding a tablet, pretending. Zara took one look at him and nearly smiled. "Good morning?" He nodded. "Mitchell." She waited. He clearly had something to say. The problem was he didn't know how to say it. Finally, he looked at his tablet. "There appear to be inconsistencies in your hours." She blinked. "My what?" "Your schedule. You arrived late last Thursday." "No." His eyebrow lifted. "No, I stayed 2.5 hours late Tuesday." She pointed a spoon at him. "You added a board dinner 6 hours before guests arrived. So unless you've started paying overtime, I think we're even." The kitchen became very quiet. Sun-young slowly backed away. Mrs. Park appeared from nowhere, then immediately disappeared again. Experience had taught her when to observe from a safe distance. Jae-won opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, then realized he had completely lost control of the conversation, which was becoming alarmingly common around Zara Mitchell. She tilted her head slightly. "Is there something else you wanted?" The question was gentle, not mocking, not defensive, just honest. For one dangerous moment, he considered telling the truth. "I couldn't stop thinking about you. I didn't sleep. I spent half the night standing in this kitchen." Instead, he said, "No, coward." The thought appeared immediately. His own mind had become hostile. Wonderful. Zara studied him, then said something unexpected. "How did you sleep?" The question landed like a punch, because she already knew. He could tell. Something in her eyes told him she knew. Not everything, but enough. "Fine. A lie. An obvious lie." She nodded slowly. "There's extra ginger in your soup." His stomach dropped. "What?" "Ginger helps when people don't sleep." Their eyes met. The kitchen became very still. Neither looked away, and for the first time, something shifted. Not attraction, that had been growing for weeks. Not curiosity, that was already there. This was recognition. The moment two people realize they're beginning to see each other clearly, and that's always the dangerous part. Because once someone sees you, distance becomes much harder to maintain. The following morning, Mrs. Park made a mistake, a completely innocent mistake. One question, one harmless question, and it changed everything. How was the date? Zara's face lit up, absolutely lit up. The smile appeared instantly. Bright, warm, real. Jae-won had just entered the corridor, coffee in hand, and stopped walking again. He was wonderful. The words hit harder than expected. Mrs. Park nodded carefully. Oh, we talked for hours. Strike 1. He actually listens. Strike 2. He remembers things. Strike 3. Jae-won's grip tightened around the coffee cup. He remembered a story I told him 2 weeks ago. Home run. Mrs. Park risked a glance toward the corridor. Dangerous. Very dangerous. Meanwhile, Zara continued, completely unaware. We're going out again Friday. Silence, then footsteps. Retreating, controlled, measured, yet somehow furious. Mrs. Park watched him leave, then looked back at Zara, who had definitely noticed. The younger woman remained focused on breakfast, but her smile faded slightly. Interesting. Very interesting. Because for the first time, Mrs. Park suspected something shocking. Zara wasn't as unaware as she pretended to be. And if that was true, the real story was only beginning. Friday arrived with rain. Not the dramatic kind. Not the cinematic kind that crashes against windows and announces itself. Just a steady gray drizzle that covered Seoul in a soft haze and made the city feel smaller somehow. Zara liked rain. Rain made people honest. She was finishing breakfast service when her phone buzzed. The message came from Atlanta. She almost ignored it. Then she saw the sender, Chef Raymond Hughes, her former mentor, the man almost never texted. She opened the message and froze. Call me. Big opportunity. She waited until lunch prep was complete before returning the call. Raymond answered on the first ring. Zara, Chef, I have a question. Okay, how much do you like Korea? Her eyebrows rose. That's a strange opening. Answer it. She laughed softly. I like it. Enough to stay? That got her attention. The smile disappeared. What happened? Raymond exhaled, then said 4 words. The Marlowe Group called. Everything stopped. The Marlowe Group wasn't just another restaurant company. It was one of the most respected hospitality organizations in America. Their executive chefs became industry legends. People built careers trying to get through their doors. And now they were asking about her. Executive Chef, Atlanta. 6-figure salary, creative control, her own kitchen, her own staff, her own legacy. For several seconds she couldn't speak. Raymond finally broke the silence. Zara, I'm here. You interested? Her eyes drifted toward the kitchen window, toward the herbs growing in small pots, toward the city beyond them, toward the strange life she'd built in Seoul, toward a certain impossible billionaire who spent entirely too much time standing in doorways. And for the first time, she didn't know the answer. That scared her a lot. The problem arrived 3 days later. Her name was Jae-won, and she looked like trouble. Not obvious trouble, sophisticated trouble. The dangerous kind. The kind that smiled while delivering insults. The kind that never raised its voice. The kind that destroyed things politely. She arrived at Kwon Tower in a black luxury sedan. Elegant, beautiful, perfectly dressed. The lobby staff recognized her immediately. For years, she had been considered the obvious future Mrs. Kwon. Nothing had ever been officially announced. But powerful families had a way of creating expectations without speaking them aloud. Ji-yeon entered the penthouse like someone returning home, which immediately irritated Mrs. Park. A bad sign. The first time Zara saw her was entirely by accident. She was carrying a tray through the corridor when Ji-yeon emerged from Jae-won's office. Their eyes met briefly. Ji-yeon smiled. Perfectly pleasant, perfectly beautiful, perfectly fake. Years of experience told Zara everything she needed to know instantly. Danger. Ji-yeon paused. Oh. Her smile widened slightly. You must be the new cook. Not chef. Cook. Interesting, Zara smiled politely. You must be Ji-yeon. A flicker crossed the woman's face. Tiny. Almost invisible. Then gone. Mr. Kwon has spoken about me? No. The answer landed immediately. Ji-yeon's smile became thinner. How surprising. Then she walked away. The interaction lasted less than 20 seconds. Yet somehow Zara knew trouble had arrived. The following week became unbearable. Ji-yeon appeared constantly. Business lunches, charity meetings, foundation partnerships, investor dinners. Always legitimate reasons. Always professional. Always nearby. One evening Zara entered the dining room carrying dessert and stopped. Ji-yeon was laughing. Jae-won was smiling, actually smiling. The sight hit unexpectedly hard, harder than it should have, because she had no claim on him, none, zero. He wasn't hers. He wasn't even close to hers, yet the feeling still arrived, sharp, painful, immediate, jealousy. She hated it instantly, hated how quickly it appeared, hated how much it hurt, hated how clearly it revealed the truth, because people only get jealous when they care. And Zara Mitchell cared far more than she had admitted. Unfortunately, very unfortunately, someone noticed. Mrs. Park, of course. Later that evening, she found Zara reorganizing spices that did not need reorganizing. A classic sign. "You okay?" "I'm fine." A terrible lie. Mrs. Park almost smiled. "You know, for someone who cooks professionally, you're remarkably bad at hiding your emotions." Zara sighed. Mrs. Park. I don't need wisdom right now." "Good," the older woman nodded, "because I wasn't going to give any." That earned a laugh, brief but real. Then Mrs. Park's expression softened. "Just don't assume you know the whole story." The words lingered long after she left. 3 days later, everything got worse, because Daniel became serious. The relationship had reached the stage where real conversations happened. Future conversations, life conversations, the dangerous ones. The two of them sat beside the Han River, watching city lights reflect across the water. Daniel looked unusually nervous. "What?" she said. He laughed softly. "Am I that obvious?" "Yes." "Wonderful." She smiled. "Talk." Daniel looked across the river, then back at her, then finally said it. "I got an offer." Her stomach tightened. Singapore. The word landed heavily. International transfer, major promotion, better salary, bigger role. The kind people rarely turn down. "If I take it," he said carefully, "I'd like you to come with me." The world seemed to pause, because suddenly this wasn't dating anymore. This was a decision, a real one, a future, a life. Daniel's voice softened. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight." Good. Because she didn't have one. 6 months ago, she would have said yes. Without hesitation, without thought, without question. Now she wasn't sure. And somehow the uncertainty had everything to do with a stubborn billionaire who still didn't realize how obvious he had become. The misunderstanding happened the following Tuesday, and it nearly destroyed everything. Jae-won wasn't supposed to hear the conversation. Neither was Ji-yeon. Neither was Mrs. Park. But fate has a cruel sense of timing, and all three heard it, every word. Zara was on the phone with Raymond. The Atlanta opportunity had become real, very real. An interview was scheduled. The salary offer had arrived. The numbers were astonishing, and Raymond asked the obvious question. "So what's stopping you?" Long silence. Then Zara finally answered, and unknowingly shattered 3 hearts at once. "I think I've stayed too long." The corridor became very still. Jae-won froze. Mrs. Park closed her eyes. Ji-yeon smiled. Zara hadn't meant the words the way they sounded. Not entirely. She'd meant the uncertainty, the waiting, the feeling of standing in a doorway between two lives, Atlanta or Seoul, the future she had planned, or the future she hadn't. But words have a way of becoming something else once other people hear them. And unfortunately, other people had heard them. Jae-won stood frozen in the corridor. For a brief moment, he forgot how to move, forgot how to breathe, forgot everything except one terrifying realization. She was leaving. The thought struck with surprising violence, not because employees left. Employees always left. That was normal, expected, necessary. But Zara wasn't supposed to leave. The realization arrived before he could stop it, before logic, before discipline, before control. And for the first time in years, Kwon Jae-won felt fear, real fear, the kind no amount of money could negotiate with, the kind that came from understanding that someone mattered before you'd found the courage to tell them. Across the corridor, Ji-yeon quietly smiled, not visibly, not enough for anyone to notice, but internally she smiled, because she understood exactly what had happened, and exactly what she needed to do next. That evening she requested a private dinner meeting. Jae-won accepted automatically, out of professional habit. The restaurant overlooked the Han River. Elegant, expensive, quiet. The kind of place where powerful people conducted important conversations. Unfortunately, this conversation wasn't really about business. Ji-yeon waited until dessert arrived. Then she spoke. "She's leaving." Jae-won looked up. He hated that she knew. He hated that she could see it. He hated that his reaction was obvious enough to notice. Still, he remained composed. "I assume you're referring to Miss Mitchell." Ji-yeon smiled. Slow, careful, measured, dangerous. "I am." He set down his glass. And she leaned back slightly. "I think it's probably for the best." Silence. A dangerous silence. She's talented, ambitious, young. Eventually, people like that move toward opportunities that match their potential. She took a sip of wine, then added the final blade. Attachment can make that difficult. For the first time all evening, Jae-won's eyes hardened. Not dramatically, not visibly to most people, but enough. Ji-yeon noticed immediately, and suddenly understood something she hadn't understood before. This was no longer theoretical. This wasn't curiosity, or admiration, or temporary fascination. He loved her. The realization struck Ji-yeon with unexpected force. Because for years she had occupied a space nobody else could enter. Kwon Jae-won kept everyone at arm's length. Everyone. Apparently, until Zara Mitchell. Ji-yeon finished her wine, and understood she had already lost. The next morning, Zara received the formal offer. Atlanta. Executive chef, the Marlowe Group. A salary that would make most chefs dizzy. Creative control. Prestige. Opportunity. Everything she'd worked for. Everything she'd dreamed about. Everything she'd planned. She stared at the email for nearly 10 minutes. Then closed the laptop. Still no answer. Mrs. Park found her an hour later standing by the herbs. It had become Zara's thinking spot. The older woman quietly joined her. Neither spoke immediately. Finally, Mrs. Park broke the silence. "Good news," Zara nodded. "Very." "And?" Zara laughed softly. The sound carried no joy. "That's the problem." Mrs. Park understood immediately. Because difficult decisions rarely involve bad options. They involve good options. Competing good options. Those are harder. Much harder. "You don't know what you want." "It wasn't a question." Zara sighed. "No." Mrs. Park looked toward the city, then smiled slightly. "You know what I've learned after 30 years? "What?" The answer usually isn't the confusing part. She paused. "The courage is." The words lingered long after Mrs. Park walked away. That Friday, Daniel asked for an answer. Not because he was pressuring her, because life required decisions. Singapore needed a response. His company needed confirmation, and he deserved honesty. They met at the same riverside park, the same bench, the same lights reflecting across the water. Everything looked familiar. Everything felt different. Daniel sat quietly, patient, kind, exactly the way he always had been, which somehow made this harder. "I can't go." The words finally came, soft, honest, painful. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Not because he was surprised, because he'd already known. People always know long before conversations happen. He opened his eyes again. "Is it him?" Zara looked down, silence. That was answer enough. Daniel nodded slowly, a sad smile appearing. "I thought so." She felt terrible. Absolutely terrible. Because he deserved better than this. Better than uncertainty. Better than being compared to someone else. Better than losing a competition he never knew existed. "I'm sorry. I know." His voice remained gentle. That somehow hurt even more. After a long moment, he stood. "So what now?" Zara looked toward the river, toward the city, toward the impossible future waiting somewhere inside it. "I don't know." Daniel smiled sadly. Then did something remarkable, something few people have the maturity to do. He kissed her forehead. Not her lips, her forehead. A quiet goodbye, a blessing, a release. Then he walked away, and Zara watched him disappear into the crowd, knowing she had just lost a genuinely good man for something that might not even exist. Back at Kwon Tower, everything exploded. Chairman Kwon arrived unexpectedly. Again. Mrs. Park immediately knew trouble had arrived. The signs were obvious. The older man's expression, his posture, the way he bypassed everyone, and went directly to Jae-won's office. 10 minutes later, voices emerged. Not shouting. Neither man shouted. That wasn't how Kwons fought. They fought quietly, which was worse, far worse. Inside, 20 years of tension finally surfaced. You are risking everything. Chairman Kwon's voice remained controlled. Am I? Yes. You are allowing emotion to influence judgment. Jaw tightened. No. This is the first decision I've made in years that isn't based solely on judgment. He met his father's eyes, perhaps for the first time as an equal. Then came the real question, the one both men had been avoiding. Do you love her? The room froze. Neither moved. Neither spoke. Seconds passed. Then Jae-won answered, and everything changed. Yes. One word. Nothing more. No speeches. No explanations. No qualifications. Just truth. Simple. Terrifying. Final. Chairman Kwon sat back slowly. Because you can't debate honesty. You can dislike it, fear it, resist it, but you can't argue with it. The older man looked at his son for a long time, then unexpectedly asked, Does she know? Jae-won laughed once, a short, humorless laugh. No. And for the first time in decades, Chairman Kwon almost smiled. Because suddenly his brilliant son looked less like a billionaire genius and more like every nervous man in history. That evening, Zara worked late, very late, trying not to think, trying not to decide, trying not to feel. Unfortunately, none of it worked. The kitchen was quiet. Everyone else had gone home. Only the city remained, and her thoughts. The sound of footsteps interrupted them. She turned and froze. Jae-won stood in the doorway, not watching from it, not leaning against it, standing there, like a man preparing for something difficult. His expression told her immediately. Something was about to happen, something important, something neither of them could walk back. Neither spoke. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, the distance between them shorter, the silence heavier. Finally, he took a step forward, then another, until he stood beside the island, looking directly at her. And for the first time since she'd arrived in Seoul, Kwon Jae-won had absolutely nowhere left to hide. The kitchen was silent. Not uncomfortable, not awkward, just still. The city lights stretched beyond the glass like 1,000 distant stars, reflecting across the polished marble surfaces and turning the room gold. I know about Atlanta, he said. Zara didn't look surprised. Mrs. Park? No. I overheard part of a phone call, she nodded. That sounded about right. Nothing stayed hidden forever. It's a remarkable opportunity, he continued. It is, you should be proud. A small smile touched her face. I am, silence returned, heavy, complicated, because both of them understood what wasn't being said. Finally, Zara folded her arms. Is that why you're here? No. The answer came immediately, without hesitation, without calculation, and that alone made her heart skip. Because Kwon Jae-won rarely answered anything without thinking, he looked down briefly, then back at her. And for the first time since she'd known him, the billionaire disappeared. The CEO disappeared. The public figure disappeared. Only the man remained, and he looked terrified. I've spent most of my life believing distance was strength, he said quietly. Distance keeps things simple. You leave space between yourself and people. The expectations become smaller. A small, humorless laugh escaped him. Disappointment becomes manageable. He looked back at her, and then you arrived. You walked into my home and treated everyone like they mattered. You remembered names, birthdays. You remembered Mrs. Park's daughter had exams. You remembered Sun Young was nervous about graduate school applications. His eyes found hers. And somehow, you remembered me. Zara felt something tighten painfully in her chest. She knew exactly how much those words were costing him. He took a breath, then finally said it. The thing that had been building for months. The thing everyone else had already seen. The thing he could no longer avoid. I love you. The words hung between them. Simple, honest, no grand speech, no dramatic flourish, no perfect movie dialogue, just truth, raw and terrifying. I love you. Silence, the longest silence of his life. Jae-won stood completely still, waiting, not negotiating, not persuading, not asking. simply offering the truth and accepting whatever came next. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, he had surrendered control entirely, and that frightened him more than any business deal ever had. Zara looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who stood in kitchen doorways, the man who to soup ingredients, the man who drank terrible tea alone because he missed her, the man who had spent years building walls and months quietly dismantling them. Then she laughed, a small laugh, warm and disbelieving and emotional. Jae-won's stomach dropped, completely, instantly, because laughter could mean anything. Then tears appeared in her eyes, and suddenly he couldn't breathe. Zara wiped her face, still laughing softly, then shook her head. "You are unbelievably late." He blinked. "What?" She laughed again, the real laugh, the beautiful one, the one he secretly waited to hear every morning. "Do you have any idea how late you are? You spent months staring from doorways. You invented kitchen renovations. You reviewed household schedules. You practically conducted scientific research on coffee temperatures." By now, she stood directly in front of him, close enough to see the uncertainty in his eyes, close enough to see hope, close enough to see fear. Then she smiled, and finally gave him mercy. "I love you too." The world stopped, or at least it felt that way. For one perfect second, nothing existed except relief. Massive, overwhelming, beautiful relief. The kind that leaves a person speechless, which was fortunate, because neither of them had words. Not immediately. So instead, Zara kissed him, and the months of waiting disappeared. The months of uncertainty disappeared. The months of doorway conversations disappeared. Everything disappeared, except them. Mrs. Park learned about it exactly 23 minutes later, not because anyone told her, because she possessed supernatural powers. Or at least that was the staff's official theory. She entered the kitchen, saw Zara smiling, saw Jae-won smiling, stopped, looked at both of them, then calmly said, "Finally," and walked out. Neither ever discovered how she knew. 3 weeks later, Zara made her decision. The Atlanta offer remained open. The salary remained extraordinary. The opportunity remained once in a lifetime. But something had changed. Someone had changed. She called Chef Raymond. He answered immediately. "Tell me you're accepting." "I'm not." Long silence. Then he laughed, loudly, unexpectedly. "What?" I wondered how serious he was. She blinked. "You knew, Zara." His voice dripped with amusement. "I've been mentoring chefs longer than you've been alive. You don't turn down that offer for a city. You turn it down for a person." She smiled, unable to stop herself. "Yeah, I thought so." Chairman Kwon arrived 1 month later, this time announced, which immediately worried everyone, because announced visits were often worse. The older man requested lunch, private, just himself and Zara, no Jae-won, no staff, no witnesses. The invitation terrified Jae-won, which amused Zara enormously. "You negotiate billion-dollar mergers." "I do." "You face hostile investors." "Frequently." "And you're nervous?" "Yes." The answer came instantly, which made her laugh. A lot, unfortunately. Lunch happened anyway. Chairman Kwon arrived precisely on time, sat down, accepted tea, and studied Zara carefully for nearly 30 seconds. Finally, he spoke. "My son loves you." Not exactly a subtle opening. Zara nearly choked. "He has become impossible," the older man continued. She blinked. "What?" He smiles. "He leaves work early. He voluntarily attends family dinners. He bought herbs." Zara covered her mouth. The chairman looked genuinely disturbed. "He bought herbs." She lost the battle. Laughter escaped. Chairman Kwon watched her, then unexpectedly smiled. A real smile, small but real. "You make him happy. I spent years teaching him how to succeed. I forgot to teach him how to live." Silence settled between them. Warm this time, not cold, not hostile. Then Chairman Kwon nodded once, firmly, as though finalizing a contract. "Take care of him." Zara smiled. "I plan to." The old man stood, straightened his jacket, then added, "And make sure he keeps buying herbs." The proposal happened exactly 11 months later. In the kitchen. Of course, where else? Not Paris, not a yacht, not a private island. The the kitchen, the original one with the herbs where everything began. Zara was preparing dinner service when Jae-won walked in carrying a small wooden box. She immediately narrowed her eyes. "What are you doing?" He looked nervous, very nervous, which instantly confirmed her suspicions. Jae-won, no response. Jae-won, still nothing. He simply opened the box. Inside sat a ring, beautiful, elegant, simple, perfect. Zara stared, then slowly looked up. His voice was steady, barely. "You made my home feel like a home. You made my life feel like a life, and I would like very much." His private smile appeared, the one only she ever saw. "For you to continue being impossible to live without." Tears immediately appeared, again, which annoyed her because she had planned to answer gracefully. Now she was crying, unhelpfully. She laughed through tears, a complete mess, then nodded repeatedly, because words had temporarily stopped working. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. The ring fit perfectly. The supper club opened 18 months later. Small, intimate, extraordinary. Reservations booked 6 months in advance. Food critics loved it. Guests loved it. The neighborhood loved it. Most importantly, Zara loved it. And every Friday evening, without fail, one table remained permanently reserved. Never listed, never available, never discussed. A corner table near the kitchen, where a certain billionaire liked to sit after work and pretend he wasn't watching his wife cook. Everyone noticed. No one mentioned it. Years later, a journalist asked Jae-won a question. The interview focused on business, technology, leadership, success. Then, near the end, she asked, "What was the best investment you ever made?" The journalist expected something involving billions, artificial intelligence, global expansion, innovation. Instead, he answered immediately. No hesitation, no calculation, just certainty. A plane ticket from Atlanta to Seoul. The journalist laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't, not even a little, because sometimes the most valuable thing you'll ever find isn't a company, or a fortune, or a title. Sometimes it's a person carrying a spice kit and wearing a yellow jacket, who walks into your life and refuses to let you remain the version of yourself you've settled for. And if you're wise enough to recognize that, everything changes.